Most of us picture the first Thanksgiving as a peaceful feast, smiling pilgrims, long tables, and roasted turkey. But the truth is far more gripping. In 1620, a small group of English separatists, men and women who longed to worship God freely, set sail on a small cargo ship called the Mayflower. They weren't seeking adventure or wealth. They were escaping persecution, exiled for their faith, and longing for a place where they could serve God according to Scripture and conscience. But this wasn't the first time they left everything behind. For years, they lived in exile in Holland, worshiping secretly to escape the reach of the English crown. They longed to build a community where Scripture shaped life, not kings or politics. When they finally set sail for America, they signed the Mayflower Compact, a covenant for the glory of God and the advancement of Christian faith. It wasn't just a voyage, it was an act of worship, a prayer, and motivation. And yet obedience led them first to wilderness, not comfort. Because faith sometimes walks through hardship before it reaches the promise. 102 passengers braved 66 days of stormy seas. They landed on the frozen shores of Cape Cod, not their intended destination. Winter had already begun. There were no houses, no crops, no friends, and only the wilderness and cold. That first winter was brutal. Half of them died. Graves outnumbered cabins, and every family lost somebody they loved. And yet, when spring came, they stopped and gave thanks. How do you worship when you've buried the people you love? How do you thank God when your heart is broken? Today, I want to share 3 ways the first Thanksgiving reveals faith in hard times. Number 1, faith remembers God's character, not our circumstances. They had every reason to turn bitter. They lost their children, spouses, leaders, everything that was familiar. But instead of measuring God by their pain, they looked back to His faithfulness. Just when they thought they could not survive another season, God, He sent help. A native man walked into their settlement speaking perfect English. His name was Squanto. Years earlier, he had been kidnapped, taken to England, and enslaved. But through what only God could orchestrate, he found freedom, learned English, and returned home, only to find his tribe wiped out by disease. He could have turned bitter. Instead, he became the bridge that saved the Pilgrims' lives. He taught them how to plant corn and fertilize the soil and fish the local rivers. Through tragedy, God had already prepared a way. Psalm 46 says, God is our refuge and our strength, a very present help in trouble. Faith, it doesn't deny suffering. It declares God hasn't changed, even when everything else has. Maybe your story feels a little like theirs. You followed God, but it's led you into harder ground than you had expected. You prayed for new beginnings and instead found yourself in a storm. But the same God who met them on that frozen shore is still meeting you in your uncertainty today. He doesn't promise us safe journeys, only His faithful presence along the way. Number 2, gratitude. It grows in community. That harvest celebration wasn't just a private family meal. It was a moment of mercy, a table shared between survivors and strangers. After that first harvest, they invited their new friends. And about 90 of those men joined the roughly 50 surviving pilgrims for a 3-day feast. They prayed, they sang psalms, and they shared food, not out of abundance, but out of gratitude. It was a celebration born from loss and yet filled with praise. Gratitude thrives when we thank God together. And when you're hurting, isolation whispers, be alone. But faith whispers, invite others in. Who's carried you through that winter? Maybe it's time to thank them and thank God for them. Number 3, hope is planted in barren ground. Even after loss, they planted again. They sowed seeds in the same soil that held their loved ones' graves. That's faith. Romans 5 says, "We rejoice in our suffering, because suffering produces endurance, and hope does not put us to shame." Faith in loss isn't denial, it's defiance, the refusal to let darkness have the last word. And maybe this Thanksgiving your table has an empty chair. Maybe your heart feels like winter. But hope, the resurrection kind, still grows in this cold soil. So let's pause for a moment and think of the faces that they lost, the friends they buried that winter, and now imagine the courage it took to lift their voices and worship again. Maybe that's what real Thanksgiving is, not ignoring pain, but bringing it before God and saying, "You are still God." And right where you are, whisper the truth, "God, you have been faithful, even here." So before you eat or pray this week, take one moment. Write down one loss from this year and one mercy. Then thank God for meeting you in both those. That's where faith begins, in honest gratitude, right in the middle of our grief. If you'd like a short reflective guide on how to help you do that, there's a free Thanksgiving faith and gratitude handout in the link below. The first Thanksgiving wasn't really just a feast of abundance. It was a declaration of faith in scarcity. They thanked God not because everything was perfect, but because He still was faithful. And the same God who carried them through that winter is faithful in you and your hard season too. When life feels like winter, remember, spring and resurrection always comes. And if this encouraged you, subscribe for more reflections like this and share it with somebody who needs hope this Thanksgiving. Because even in loss, God, He is still worthy of our thanks.